Even Scrappy's closest friends were terrified that this might be the end of the road for the Atlanta rap legend. But in a shocking turn of events, Scrappy is showing signs of a miraculous recovery that even the top medical experts can't explain. Doctors who had given grim predictions are now in shock. "We've never seen anything like this," one of them admitted. Just days ago, Lil Scrappy was clinging to life, his condition rapidly deteriorating as doctors and family members prepared for the worst. According to the hospital, relatives who had been expecting the worst are now in disbelief. Mama D is convinced that this is divine intervention, while Bambi is still processing the emotional roller coaster after nearly losing him. Fans are desperately searching for answers, wanting to know what really happened in that hospital room, what Scrappy said when he finally opened his eyes, and most importantly, is this the beginning of his journey back to full health or just a temporary miracle before another devastating turn? Stay tuned because this story is far from over. Just a few days ago, Lil Scrappy was lying motionless in his hospital bed, hooked up to machines, his condition worsening by the hour. Doctors had already warned the family to brace for the worst. The once unstoppable rapper, known for his raw energy and powerful presence, was now fighting for his life, and it didn't seem like he was going to win. Mama D was distraught. She hadn't left the hospital since Scrappy was admitted. She paced the hallways, whispering prayers and placing blame on everyone. Meanwhile, Bambi, Scrappy's estranged wife, had a more complex reaction. She still cared for him, but their tumultuous history made things difficult. Some whispered that she didn't even want to go to the hospital, that she had been pressured by friends and family to be there. But regardless of any past drama, she was still devastated by what was happening. "My son is a fighter, and I refuse to believe he won't pull through," Mama D said in frustration. Then the unthinkable happened. It started with the smallest movement, hardly noticeable at first. One of the nurses thought she saw Scrappy's fingers twitch. She dismissed it as a reflex, but then it happened again. This time, she wasn't the only one who noticed. "Did you see that?" one nurse whispered to another. Before they could even process what was happening, they rushed to his bedside, calling for the doctors. The man they had all but given up on was waking up. Mama D, who had been sitting in the corner of the room with her head in her hands, looked up and gasped. "Scrappy!" Her voice was barely above a whisper, as if she was afraid to hope. Scrappy's lips parted, but no words came out at first. His eyes darted around the room, confused. Doctors rushed in, checking his vitals. "Can you hear me?" "Do you know where you are?" they asked. Then, before anyone else could say another word, he finally spoke. "Mama." His voice was weak but clear. With that one word, Mama D broke down in tears. She ran to his side, gripping his hand tightly, afraid he would slip away again. "Oh baby, you scared me half to death," she cried. Meanwhile, Bambi, who had been standing motionless near the doorway, tears streaming down her face, was left completely speechless. Even Scrappy's closest friends were terrified that this might be the end of the road for the Atlanta rap legend. But in a shocking turn of events, he's showing signs of a miraculous recovery that even top medical experts can't explain. Doctors who once gave grim predictions are now stunned. "We've never seen anything like this before," one of them admitted. Just days ago, Lil Scrappy was barely holding on to life, his condition rapidly declining while doctors and family members braced for the worst. According to hospital insiders, the entire family had been preparing for the inevitable until something unexplainable happened. Mama D is convinced this is divine intervention, while Bambi is still struggling to process the emotional roller coaster of almost losing him. Fans are desperate for answers. What happened in that hospital room? What were Scrappy's first words when he opened his eyes? And is this the beginning of his road to full recovery, or just a temporary miracle before another devastating turn? Stay tuned because this story is far from over. A few days ago, Lil Scrappy lay motionless in his hospital bed, connected to machines, his condition worsening by the hour. Doctors had already warned the family to prepare for the worst. The once fiery rapper, known for his raw energy and powerful presence, was now fighting for his life and losing. Mama D hadn't left the hospital since his admission, pacing the hallways, whispering prayers, and pointing fingers in desperation. Meanwhile, Bambi, Scrappy's estranged wife, had a more complicated reaction. Although she still cared for him, their rocky history made things difficult. Some sources claimed she had hesitated to come to the hospital, only showing up after pressure from family and friends. But once there, she was deeply shaken. She was seen breaking down in frustration as she whispered, "I just want him to be okay." Then the unthinkable happened. It started as a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, a flicker of his fingers. A nurse noticed it but dismissed it as a reflex. But then it happened again, and this time, she wasn't the only one who saw it. "Did you see that?" One nurse whispered to another. Within moments, the entire medical staff was on alert. As nurses rushed to his bedside, calling for doctors, the man they had nearly given up on was waking up. In the corner of the room, Mama D, who had been sitting with her head in her hands, suddenly gasped. "Scrappy!" Her voice trembled, barely above a whisper, as if she was afraid to believe it. His lips parted, but at first, no sound came out. His eyes darted around the room, confused, lost. Doctors swarmed him, checking his vitals, asking urgent questions. "Can you hear us? Do you know where you are?" Then, in a weak but clear voice, he finally spoke, "Mama." At that moment, Mama D collapsed into tears, clutching his hand tightly, as if terrified he might slip away again. "Oh, baby, you scared me half to death," she sobbed. Across the room, Bambi stood frozen in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. This wasn't supposed to happen. Scrappy's body had been shutting down. The doctors had already prepared for the worst. But now, here he was, awake, conscious, and calling for his mother. One of the doctors, Dr. Reynolds, shook his head in disbelief. "This is incredible," he muttered. Checking the monitors, he saw stable vitals, something that simply shouldn't have been possible. Outside the hospital room, news was spreading like wildfire. A nurse, unable to contain her excitement, texted a friend, and within minutes, social media exploded. Fans who had been waiting outside the hospital, praying and holding signs, erupted into cheers. "Y'all, Scrappy just woke up. This is a miracle. Prayers worked." One tweet read, "I need an update now. Is he talking? Is he okay? Someone tell us something." Another fan posted, "But inside Scrappy's hospital room, things were still fragile." Yes, he was awake, but he was weak. He tried to move, but his body wouldn't cooperate. His eyes scanned the room, trying to process what had happened. Mama D leaned in, her voice gentle yet firm. "Baby, you're in the hospital. You've been really sick, but you're going to be okay." His eyes met Bambi's, and for a moment, silence hung between them. The emotions were too complicated to name: love, pain, regret, relief. Finally, he managed a small, tired smile. "Didn't think I'd see you here," he said, voice hoarse from days of unconsciousness. Bambi let out a shaky laugh. "Yeah, I couldn't stay away," she admitted. Outside, the world held its breath. Was this truly a miracle, or was another twist around the corner? As the medical team rushed to perform tests, they found themselves baffled. Dr. Reynolds stood at the foot of Scrappy's bed, staring at the monitors. "This doesn't make sense," he murmured. Mama D's head snapped up. "Why? What's wrong?" Dr. Reynolds hesitated. He knew better than to give false hope, but he couldn't ignore what he was seeing. Mrs. D, just 24 hours ago, his condition was critical. His organs were shutting down. His body wasn't responding to treatment the way we had hoped. We didn't expect him to recover this quickly. Scrappy let out a weak chuckle. "I guess I'm full of surprises." His voice was rough, his body exhausted, but there was a spark in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Bambi, still shaken, finally found her voice. "Scrap, do you remember what happened?" His brows furrowed. He exhaled slowly. "Last thing I remember, I wasn't feeling right. Then everything went black." He turned to Bambi, his eyes searching hers. "You know something I don't." She hesitated, but before she could answer, Dr. Reynolds stepped in. "Let's not push him too hard right now. The important thing is that he's conscious and stable." But the tension had already set in. Outside the hospital, the media had fully caught on. Reporters swarmed the entrance, cameras flashing, microphones being shoved into the faces of anyone with information. Lil Scrappy's miraculous awakening had become a national headline. Now the world waits. Is this the start of his true recovery? Or is there another storm coming? We were shocked because this wasn't supposed to happen. Lil Scrappy's body had been shutting down, and they had already started to prepare for the possibility that he might never regain consciousness. But here he was, awake, conscious, and calling out for his mother. One of the doctors, Dr. Reynolds, shook his head in disbelief. "This is incredible," he murmured, eyes fixed on the monitors. Scrappy's vitals were stable, but medically, there had been no sign of improvement before this moment. We need to run tests. This isn't something we see every day. Outside the hospital room, word spread like wildfire. A nurse, unable to contain her excitement, texted a friend, and within minutes, social media erupted. Fans who had been gathered outside the hospital, holding signs and praying, burst into cheers when they heard the news. "Y'all, Scrappy just woke up. This is a miracle. Prayers worked. I need an update now. Is he talking? Is he okay? Someone tell us something." But inside the hospital room, things were still fragile. Scrappy was awake, yes, but he was weak. His body refused to cooperate as he tried to move, and he looked around, confused. "You're in the hospital, baby," Mama D said softly, brushing his hair back. "You've been really sick, but you're going to be okay." Scrappy's eyes landed on Bambi, and for a moment, silence stretched between them. The emotions were complicated: love, hurt, regret, relief. Finally, he managed a small, tired smile. "Didn't think I'd see you here." Bambi let out a shaky laugh. "Yeah, I couldn't stay away." The world was watching, waiting to see if this was truly a miracle, or just a brief flicker of hope before another devastating turn. Doctors wasted no time running tests, checking reflexes, monitoring his vitals. Nurses whispered among themselves, faces showing a mix of awe and uncertainty. Dr. Reynolds furrowed his brow as he studied the monitors. "This doesn't make sense." Mama D snapped her head up. "What do you mean?" The doctor hesitated, unwilling to give false hope. "Mrs. D, just 24 hours ago, his condition was critical. His organs were shutting down. His body wasn't responding to treatment. We didn't expect this, not this quickly." Scrappy, still groggy, let out a hoarse chuckle. "I guess I'm full of surprises." His voice was weak, but his spirit wasn't. Bambi stayed silent, eyes filled with something she wasn't saying. Scrappy noticed immediately. "What are you not telling me?" His voice was rough, but his tone was sharp. Bambi swallowed hard, glancing at Mama D before looking back at Scrappy. Finally, she sighed. Scrappy didn't blink. Bambi's voice dropped to a whisper. "Something happened. Things you don't know about." Mama D's eyes widened. "Girl, what are you talking about?" Bambi hesitated. Maybe now wasn't the time. But Scrappy's heart rate monitor beeped faster. Even in his weak state, frustration was building. "Nah, if I fought my way back from whatever happened to me, I deserve to know the truth. So start talking." Before Bambi could say another word, a nurse poked her head into the room, looking anxious. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but someone is here asking to see him." Mama D frowned. "Who?" The nurse hesitated. "His father." Scrappy's entire body tensed. Daryl Richardson Sr. had been absent for most of his life. Mama D instantly shook her head. "Oh, hell no, he doesn't need to be here." Bambi, however, looked at Scrappy. "Maybe you should hear him out." Scrappy just stared, his mind racing. First, he wakes up to find out his recovery is a medical mystery. Then, Bambi is hiding something from him. And now, the father who had never been there suddenly wanted to be involved. Outside, the media was in a frenzy. Lil Scrappy wakes up, a true miracle. Experts weigh in on the rapper's astounding recovery. Fans celebrate as Lil Scrappy defies the odds. If Scrappy survives this ordeal, he should drop an album about it. Some fans speculated that Scrappy had been misdiagnosed. Others believed a higher power had stepped in. And then there were those who thought the story was far from over, that something darker was lurking beneath the surface. Inside the hospital room, Scrappy's heart pounded as his past came crashing back into the present. Daryl Richardson Sr. stepped into the room, eyes filled with regret. "Son, I don't know how to say this, but I'm sorry. I've been a bad father. I wasn't there when you needed me. I should have been. I never imagined it would take something like this for me to realize how much I messed up." His voice cracked as he stood at the door, hesitating. Mama D clenched her jaw, arms crossed. Scrappy's eyes darkened, emotions swirling. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. His body needed time to heal. His heart, even more. But one thing was certain, this was just the beginning. And the truth was coming, whether they were ready for it or not. "No, Daryl, you don't get to just come in here and act like you can erase all the years you were absent. You weren't there when he needed you, and now you want to show up just because he's lying in a hospital bed?" Scrappy's hands were clenched into fists as he lay there, the weight of his past colliding with his present. He could feel the anger welling up inside of him, but a small part of him was beginning to soften. I can't handle it any longer, Ma. The tension was too much. I'm tired of hearing this. We've been fighting for years, and I'm just tired. I'm alive now, and I want peace, even if it means listening to what he has to say. Mama D's face twisted, her anger turning to sadness. Scrappy, don't you see that after all these years of him ignoring you and breaking promises, he doesn't deserve your forgiveness? Scrappy turned to his mother. Ma, I don't need you to fight my battles any longer. I've held on to this anger for far too long. Just as everything seemed to be coming to a head, the door to the hospital room opened again, and a nurse came in with urgent news. Lil Scrappy, we just got the results of your most recent tests. I know the doctor said you were making progress, but this is beyond what we expected. Scrappy's eyes narrowed in curiosity, and his heartbeat quickened. He stood there motionless, watching the exchange. He had no defense, no words to make up for the damage he'd done. He just nodded, his heart heavy with regret. In fact, this recovery is nothing short of miraculous. For a brief moment, no one spoke. The room was filled with disbelief as they all tried to process what they had just heard. Scrappy blinked multiple times as the weight of the situation settled into his mind. The nurse continued, her voice steady but filled with awe. We've seen a dramatic improvement in your condition. The organs that were failing just a few days ago are now functioning normally. Your brain activity, which had us worried, is stable, and there's no sign of any lasting damage. The nurse grinned. You're going to be okay. You're going to make a full recovery. We never expected to see results like this, especially not so quickly. Your progress is unlike anything we've seen before. The room burst into cheers and tears. Bambi gave Scrappy a tight hug. Mama D covered her mouth, her eyes brimming with emotion. Even Daryl seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Scrappy looked around the room, his eyes locking with each person, confirming that everything was going to be okay. Finally, the conversation turned back to Scrappy. This recovery is unprecedented. There is no medical explanation for it, and we don't know how your body is healing at such a rapid pace, but we're not questioning it. It's a miracle. Bambi wiped away the tears streaming down her face. Scrappy, you have another chance at life, and we have another chance as a family. However, even as Scrappy basked in the relief of his recovery, there was one unanswered question. How would this affect his relationship with his father? Scrappy had the chance to heal physically, but could his relationship with his father be restored as easily? Scrappy turned to his father, his voice soft but firm. You're right about one thing, Daryl, but second chances aren't easy, and they come with their own challenges. Daryl nodded, a tear trickling down his face. I know. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it right. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I hope in time. As he lay in his hospital bed, Scrappy took a deep breath, the weight of the moment still heavy on his chest. I can't promise that everything will change overnight, but I'm willing to try for both of us. The silence that followed was heavy with emotion, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that signified a new beginning, a new chapter. For the first time in years, Scrappy felt a sense of hope, that perhaps, just maybe, things could be different now. He knew this journey was far from over, but the pain, the struggles, and the hardships of the past felt less heavy because he was alive. He had his family and friends. Most importantly, he had a second chance at life. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but he knew that everyone would be watching. Whatever happened next would be a journey worth taking. As Scrappy's recovery progresses, we can only speculate what lies ahead for him. Will he fully reconcile with his father and family? Will his health continue to improve, or will new challenges arise? Most importantly, what will he do with this second chance at life? From the shock of his critical condition to his miraculous recovery, every twist in his journey has left us speechless. But the real question is, can he truly move on from the past and start fresh? Do you believe in the miracle of his recovery, or is there more to this story than meets the eye? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter in this incredible journey.